Hey everyone, I'm Emmanuel Kadosh.
And I'm Shanna Fold. Here at ILTV, it's our job to deliver you Israel's most pressing stories.
So for the latest updates, please make sure to follow ILTV on Instagram at ILTV_Israel and to like ILTV on Facebook.
And don't forget to subscribe to ILTV on YouTube.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Prime Minister Netanyahu agrees to hold Likud party primaries sometime in the next coming weeks. A Lebanese diamond magnate makes an incredible donation, and a rare concert in Brazil features music that survived the Nazi death camps. It looks like Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party could be undergoing some changes soon following the announcement of indictments against the party leader. And Netanyahu vehemently denies all allegations of wrongdoing, vowing to remain in office for as long as he's able. But he is expected to relinquish control over his other 4 ministerial portfolios, and now rivals within the Likud party are challenging him for what's left. Well, Netanyahu has now agreed to demands by party activists to hold Likud party leadership primaries within 6 weeks' time. The Prime Minister is unlikely to hold primaries before the deadline for forming a coalition, however, meaning that Israel is rolling towards a landmark third election cycle with practical certainty. That being said, even if Israel does go back to elections, it may look very different. MK Shlomo Kari of the Likud says that he's received the green light from Netanyahu to push a bill that would rewrite the rules for the vote. And here's how it works. First, Israelis would vote as normal for parties that have their own leaders. But if after that first round, no clear winner capable of forming a coalition is chosen, then a second new round would initiate, and it would allow voters to choose directly for prime minister between the two heads of the 2 most popular parties, in this case, likely Netanyahu and Benny Gantz. Then the winner would be awarded an additional 12 seats in the Knesset to ensure a stable majority. Kari explains that the idea is that if we fail to realize the will of the voters, we'll get back to the voters in order to ask which narrow government they prefer. Now, meanwhile, as Israel's election saga continues, so does the voting in Britain. And Jews in the United Kingdom are equally on edge as the controversial UK Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn inches closer to the office in 10 Downing Street. Well, here now with more is public affairs consultant Jody Cohen. Jody, thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about the party leaders here who are vying to be Prime Minister in the UK right now.
Well, a poll yesterday that came out actually as the first seat predictions, they said that they're expecting a Conservative majority of 48 in the House of Commons, which will give the Conservatives 349 seats and a clear majority, compared to Labour, which is headed by Jeremy Corbyn, which is expected to get 213, and the Liberal Democrats are expected to go down to 14, and then the Scottish National Party up to 49. So some changes there. Good news for Boris Johnson. If he gets a clear majority, he said he's going to deliver a Brexit deal by Christmas. And we have to also remember that in the lead up to the 2017 elections, there was a big majority expected for the Conservatives, but then Jeremy Corbyn managed to narrow that gap in the last 2 weeks. If that happens, we could look at a hung parliament, we could look at extensions to Brexit, and a second referendum.
Well, so how does all of this then work with respect to the Jews of the UK? How are they feeling about all this, all that's going on right now in London? And then how does that then relate to maybe the UK's foreign policy with Israel?
So we know that 40% of Jews over the last year or so have been talking about considering emigrating if Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, which is really serious and unprecedented.
Massive number, yeah.
Over the weekend, we saw the party manifestos of the 3 main parties being published, the Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats. And I've had a look at each of these and sort of identified 3 key issues that is of concern to Israel. The first one being recognition of a Palestinian state. The Conservatives have a 60-page manifesto and a very, very brief reference to recognising a 2-state solution for the Middle East.
But does it allow for the parties on the ground to negotiate, or does it have any sort of ideology of what that should look like from London's perspective?
So from Prime Minister Johnson's perspective, it's a very UK-focused manifesto. It doesn't go into detail at all.
So
it's not even a full sentence and doesn't even
it lets the parties basically deal. Okay.
Labour is a very different story. Labour says that they would immediately recognise a Palestinian state.
Unilaterally.
Yeah,
just like that. Okay.
Absolutely. And we know that from the Labour Party conference back in September, the conference voted to recognise the right of return to Palestinian refugees to Israel. And then the Liberal Democrats as well say that they would recognise a Palestinian state, although they don't say immediately like Labour.
I see.
They're looking to the second issue, which is trade with Israel. So the Conservatives obviously want to find free trade agreements with the world after Brexit. It doesn't go into further detail than that.
Okay.
Labour, again, talk about immediately ending arms sales to Israel and Saudi Arabia. And we know from the party conference that they're in favour of a boycott as well. And the Liberal Democrats talk about banning arms sales to Saudi Arabia, but don't mention Israel and want to be part of the EU, so would trade with Israel as part of the EU. And then the final issue I identified is obviously Iran. The Conservative manifesto doesn't say anything about Iran.
Wow.
Absolutely nothing. But we know in September, Boris Johnson talked about the Iran agreement being a bad deal.
Of course.
The Labour Party and the Liberal Democrat Party, their manifestos both talk about returning to negotiations and reviving the deal with Iran.
All right, well, UK voters certainly have a lot to think about going into this election. Jody, thank you so much for being with us today.
No problem.
Moving on, high-ranking defense officials from Washington and Jerusalem are gathering in Israel as regional tensions with Iran have been sharply rising. United States Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley arrived on Sunday for meetings with his Israeli counterpart, Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi, and other top army brass. And the two discussed partnerships between their two respective forces for promoting regional stability. Also, Milley's visit marks the latest in a series of high-level military meetings. First, on November 10th, General Mackenzie Jr. arrived in Israel for the second ever visit to Israel by the sitting commander of CENTCOM. Then, in the 2 weeks that followed, Israel and the United States completed another blue flag military and Air Force exercise, hailed as the most advanced international drill ever held in the Jewish state. But again, these meetings are more than just for photo ops, as Prime Minister Netanyahu explains. Speaking both at the weekly cabinet meeting in Jerusalem and during a tour of the northern border on Sunday, Netanyahu says that Iran is continuing to advance its aggressions all across the Middle East, and he hopes that the international community will join in the efforts to apply more pressure on the regime in Tehran.
אתמול מפקד סנטקום, מפקד הכוחות האמריקנים במזרח התיכון, הגנרל מקנזי אמר שאיראן מתכננת התקפה נוספת. זה נכון, התקפות נוספות. אבל איראן תוקפת לא רק את שכנותיה ואותנו, איראן גם תוקפת את אזרחיה. ובשבועות האחרונים הם טבחו מאות מאזרחי איראן. זה משטר עריצות פר אקסלנס, שהדמות שלו והחזות האמיתית שלו נחשפת עכשיו לכל העולם. למי שהיה צריך הוכחה נוספת, זה משטר הטרור הגדול ביותר שקיים בעולם, גם כלפי אזרחיו פנימה.
In other news, it's been a few months since Israeli spy Eli Cohen was thrown back into the public eye thanks to Sacha Baron Cohen's portrayal in the Netflix hit series The Spy. But an unlikely source is now offering to help recover the real-life Cohen's remains from deep within Syrian territory. Eli Cohen was a spy in Syria during the 1960s, and considered a hero in Israel, the information he retrieved was invaluable to the IDF ahead of the Six-Day War of 1967. In 1965, though, he was executed for espionage by the Syrian government, and Israel's been working to recover his body ever since. Well, now, the self-proclaimed son of the only person on the planet who knows where Cohen is buried has come forward, and he wants to give Israel the dirt, but only for a price. His name is Khalid al-Hafid, son of former Syrian President Amin al-Hafiz, and he moved to New Zealand as a refugee years ago. Speaking with NewsHub on Sunday, he says that he's made contact with the Israeli Mossad via the New Zealand Secret Intelligence Service, intent on trading information on Cohen's location.
You were working with New Zealand spies to do what?
I was cooperating with the New Zealand Secret Intelligence Service in a mission with the Mossad of Israel to help find the remains of the Israeli spy Eli Cohen.
But in return, Hafid says that he's asked for $1 million. That said, he insists that despite having debts, the money is not his primary motivation. Rather, He says the $1 million was for taking on dangers involved in procuring and providing this intelligence, including visiting the war-torn Syria and risking discovery as an agent for the Mossad. Also, he says he wanted to do it not for the money or for the Mossad, but for the wife and children of Eli Cohen.
It was all for the good. It was all for the good intentions. It went wrong. It went really wrong.
The Israeli Mossad, however, reportedly only showed initial interest before going radio silent. And at any rate, whether or not the Mossad ignored him before, Hafid insists that he's still willing to cooperate.
You could have solved the mystery of 53 years.
Good, possibility. This is the thing. If you don't keep trying, you don't. But yeah, good.
Speaking of support from unlikely champions, it seems that a small but growing new group of so-called liberal-minded Arab intellectuals are now calling for an end to BDS from all over the Middle East. And just as many Israelis have long been arguing, the group says that engaging with Israel will be more beneficial in the long run for both their own societies as well as for the Palestinian cause. Well, here now to discuss via Skype where this change is coming from is Israeli consumer behavior expert Dr. Veena Abraham. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, where do you think this change is really originating from?
Well, the change really comes from for several reasons. So, first of all, the initiators of the conference think that this would only aid the Palestinian society and would promote the Palestinian cause. And it also cost the Arab nations billions of dollars in trade. So if we were to normalize our relationship with Arab countries, we would benefit greatly, and so would they. Especially they would benefit from our technologies, which in some cases have saved thousands and even millions of lives around the world. If we look at California, for example, Israeli companies helped install desalination plants, which helped it cope with the drought. So Israel has a lot to offer, and that's what they want to, get their hands on.
Now, you just mentioned that you recently took part in a conference where this was discussed. Who else was there? Who are some of the voices who are, behind this change in policy?
Okay, so if we look at this conference in particular, there were journalists involved and artists, politicians, diplomats, and one of the more prominent figures that took part in this conference was Anwar Sadat, the nephew of the late Egyptian president, Anwar Sadat.
Wow.
So it's really liberal-minded Arab thinkers, and I have to say that it really goes against the general flow in the Arab world, but it does. It is a glimmer of hope for the world, because I think that if we do normalize our relationship with them and vice versa, it will really benefit Israel not only as far as trade is concerned, but also as far as tourism is concerned.
Wow.
One of the things that I investigate is tourism behavior, and we can see that tourism coming into the Middle East increases much more than the overall world average. The average increase in tourism around the world is 6%, while the tourism increase, if we're looking, the inbound tourism to the Middle East, it's 10%. So it means that Israel can also benefit from people who would prefer to come to Israel, which now sometimes they don't because of feelings of animosity or hatred or anger towards Israel because of this diplomatic discourse between the Palestinians and Israelis.
And do you think that this is having an effect on the average Arab state citizen on the street? Is this starting, in intellectual rooms and conversations, or is this kind of like a really growing ideology?
It's a growing ideology, and a lot of the participants were really concerned over possible retribution once they get back home, because the regimes in the Arab world are really against this. But I think it does bring in a glimmer of hope, because we have social media today. They can really spread the world, just like we saw with the Arab Spring. It could be the start of something big, and I really hope that it goes towards that way, towards that direction. Because it will benefit all of us. I think that the biggest solution to the problem that we have now is really trade and economics. Once the average Palestinian feels that he or she can find work, they will be less extreme and less likely to take extreme measures like we see today.
Sure.
So I think that the economy, once we boost the Palestinian economy, this would really, really be beneficial to both and lower the level of terrorism that we're seeing.
All right, well, Dr. Abraham, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
And if you have some money to throw around, you might spend it on a fistful of diamonds, but a wealthy Lebanese man in Switzerland already has plenty of those, so instead he's putting his money towards a cause that he believes in. Hint, it involves World War II, and ILTV's Nittany Manson has the story.
Born into a family in the jewelry business, Abdallah Chatila, a Christian Lebanese businessman, left home and moved to Switzerland, where he made a killing in the diamond and real estate industries. But just days ago, Chatila spent some of that cash at an auction, $601,000 to be exact, in order to keep Nazi artifacts out of the hands of neo-Nazis, who Chatila feared might use them for propaganda purposes. And he added that while he believes these items should be burned, he recognizes that historians need them for collective memory. Chatila says that far-right populism and anti-Semitism is spreading around the world, and he did not want the items to fall into the wrong hands to be used by people with dishonest intentions. Similarly, in a recent study, it was revealed that 1 in 4 Europeans hold strong anti-Semitic views. So Chatila promptly handed over all the artifacts he purchased to the Keren HaYesod, a Jewish fundraising organization. Now, the auction held Wednesday in Munich was hosted by Hermann Historica, a German auction house, and some of the items Chatila bought include a top hat worn by Hitler, along with his cigar box, typewriter, and a special edition of Mein Kampf, Hitler's infamous and heavily embellished tell-all.
All right, now recently we've talked a lot about amazing people who've gone out of their way to honor the victims of the Holocaust. But a group of Argentinian high schoolers are now in pretty tough territory for doing exactly the opposite. And now TV's Shanna Fold has the details. Shanna, what happened? Give us the details.
There is a very cringy video that's gone viral. It's everywhere. It's all over the internet, and it's on a lot of Israeli channels, of a group of high school students from Escuela Modelo de San Juan, which is a province in Argentina. And these students were given a history assignment, and they tried to be creative with it, which turned into a very inappropriate video swapping out the lyrics of Barbie Girl by Aqua. And they told the story of the Holocaust with a lot of lewd jokes and references. But before we get into it, I'd just like the viewers to be able to see it for themselves.
Sure.
I'm a Nazi girl in a Nazi world. They live in ghettos, it's fantastic. You must behave or you are gonna die. Imagination, you are in our nation.
Come on, Joseph, let's make noodles. Yeah. Come on, Joseph, let's make noodles. Come on, Joseph, let's make soap.
Yeah.
Come on, Joseph, let's...
That's disturbing.
It's disturbing, but I think what's a little bit more disturbing is that the teacher actually graded these students a 9 out of 10, which is about an A-, if you're not familiar with the grading system.
For saying let's make soap out of Joseph.
Yeah, so it was very inappropriate, done in poor taste. I'm sure that the students had intended to do something different or creative, but certainly they shouldn't have been rewarded for it. And in case you're wondering, that teacher was actually released. He was fired from the school.
Wow.
And the school actually had to make an apology to the Sociedad Israelita de San Juan, which is a Jewish organization. And I think these students are probably regretting this video that they made.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very curious what the original assignment was that, you know, was it open enough for interpretation that it gave way to this sort of project, or was it more directed in this way? Well,
clearly with the 9 out of 10, the teacher saw it fit for the assignment. So whatever barometers they had to pass, they certainly
met the criteria, I guess.
Hit the criteria.
All right, Shanna, thank you so much for coming in and sharing this with us. On another note, while students in Argentina make offensive music about the Nazis, a concert in Brazil is now showcasing the music written in spite of the Nazis. Earlier this week, an Italian composer brought to life the notes of the dead in a concert held in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Ah, voilà la partition. Ça a été fait au camp.
Francesco Lotoro spent 30 years gathering up over 8,000 musical works that were salvaged from composers who lived during the Holocaust. Toilet paper scrolls, charcoal bag measures, and notes folded up and shoved into pockets, Lotoro was able to piece together a show that represented 1,600 different composers. And the concert commemorated the Jewish community's 75th anniversary of concentration camp liberation. And Lotoro dedicated his life to recovering these scraps from families throughout Europe who still had the music on hand.
My father, when he fled, he folded it up and put it in his pocket.
Lotoro says he's doing a mitzvah, though, or in Hebrew, a good deed, but he also says that he would probably be doing it anyway, even if he were not a Jew. At the age of 39, the composer converted from Catholicism to Judaism, and a few years back, a movie called The Maestro was actually produced showcasing the work and documenting Lotoro's journey to get the notes back and ultimately make them sing. And now ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here with this week's entertainment rundown.
Hey, Aaron, so this week there were a few questionable news articles that I came across that I felt must be shared. The first one being Spanish fashion brand called Loewe, latest capsule collection with William de Morgan, released an outfit undeniably resembling a concentration camp uniform from the Holocaust that costs more than $1,800. The collection was meant to, quote, capture a freedom of imagination, but with the specific stripe proportions, layout, the obvious uniform style garments, and specific chest patch placement, it's pretty hard to see anything but the horrific concentration camp uniform.
Yeah, I can't take my eyes off this. This is pretty tough to unsee, and to be honest, it's kind of naive to even try to sell this image. I mean, you know, like I always wonder how many people do these types of designs go through before the final decision is approved.
Exactly.
You know, and how many people truly did not see the resemblance?
Exactly. Think about the process. It goes from the page design to sample to final approval to photo shoots. No one along the way, you know, along the process put the pieces together. That sounds a little outrageous to me. And in addition, fast fashion retailers such as Zara and Urban Outfitters have had similar products slip through the cracks over recent years, which they have in turn taken off their websites and held back sales. Loewe has since pulled the uniform from their site and issued a formal apology, of course.
All right, well, hopefully people, of course, you know, designers included, start being more careful.
Right.
What's the next story today?
All right, so next up, Egyptian actor Amal Waked took to Twitter on Sunday to defend himself after backlash and criticism from anti-Israeli activists started over his role starring alongside Israeli Gal Gadot in the Wonder Woman sequel. After he made an announcement that he would appear in the superhero film, he instantly got comments such as, "You're a traitor," and a few more harsh statements sent his way.
Yeah, I actually read about this. You know, people were going absolutely nuts that he, quote, you know, had the nerve to appear next to Gal Gadot, an Israeli, on the big screen. But, you know, what was his response to all this?
Okay, so he tweeted, quote, "Art taught me to be a human before anything else, to champion human values, justice, and morals. I work on that every day and night, which is amazing." And I guess the best kind of like comeback that he can have from that, especially with all the backlash that he received.
All right, well, I'm sure that in and of itself, you know, his role and his participation is going to receive some backlash. But, you know, you can't please everyone all the time, so...
Especially the internet.
Yeah, especially not the internet. Thanks for the update, Manuel.
You're welcome.
Finally, for today, every year, rabbis from Chabad houses all over the world gather in New York for an annual conference. And the community leaders from more than 90 countries, including from Bangkok and Kenya, actually got together for this photo taken in front of Chabad Lubavitch headquarters in Crown Heights, Brooklyn on Sunday. Then at the gala dinner, the United States ambassador to Israel actually gave a shout out to Chabad on the Coast, a special young Jewish professional community that's situated right here in Tel Aviv. And in fact, he applauded them for introducing his daughter to her new husband. So, mazal tov to the happy couple. And now let's take a look at tonight's weather forecast. Tonight should be cool with an average low of about 64 or 18 degrees Celsius, though the more high altitude areas like Katzrin and Jerusalem will be closer to 50 or 10 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect warm and sunny skies overhead with highs around 85 or 30 degrees Celsius. That's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.47 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next time.